Hi, everyone. Hi, welcome to Leisrealtalk. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Okay, it's kind of hard to talk about an unpleasant topic during the holidays. But it's an important subject, and I don't want to delay it. So here we go. All right, thank you. Well, thank you, Venkat. Thank you. All right, so we have a we're going to talk about how Xi Jinping might have dethroned himself. Uh, Before we get into that, we'll talk about the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And then we will compare Wuhan 2020 to Beijing 2022 from three different angles. Okay, so but before that, I want to give you a quick rundown of what happened in 2020, right? So that we kind of refresh our memories of what happened. So according to South China Morning Post, the first COVID patient was reported in Wuhan on November 17th of 2019. He was not the first COVID, he was not the first patient contracted with the virus, but he was the first case reported in Wuhan. And then 1 month later, on December 17th, Wuhan's CDC noticed an outbreak in the city. 9 days later, on December 26th, the director of the respiratory department of Wuhan Hospital of Integrative Medicine reported to the city's public officials of an unexplained infectious pneumonia. So it's already 6 weeks later, 6 weeks after the first case was reported. And then on December 30th, Ai Fen, the director of emergency department of the Wuhan Central Hospital, got a virus test report of an unidentified pneumonia patient. And she circled the words SARS coronavirus in red. The report said SARS coronavirus. She circled it in red and took a picture of that report and sent the picture to a medical school classmate who asked her about it. And that night, that picture spread throughout the physicians community in Wuhan. And those who forwarded the picture included Dr. Li Wenliang and 7 other doctors who were later admonished by the police. And then on December 31st, Wuhan CDC issued its first public notice on the outbreak, saying that it's controllable and preventable, and that there was no evidence that it's transmittable from person to person. And on the same day, China's National Health Commission sent experts to Wuhan to investigate. And then the next day, January 1st, Wuhan police announced that the 8 individuals, meaning the doctors, were investigated for spreading false information about the outbreak. And then 2 days later, on January 3rd, Wuhan government claimed that no obvious evidence of human-to-human transmission was found. And on the same day, Dr. Li Wenliang was interrogated by the police. January 8th, China's National Health Commission confirmed that new coronavirus is the source of the epidemic. 10 days, 10 days after that, after the National Health Commission officially confirmed that this new coronavirus is causing an epidemic, on January 18th, Wuhan City held a 10,000 family feast to celebrate the Lunar New Year. 2 days later, the lead expert of National Health Commission finally admitted that the virus is transmittable from person to person. Then on January 23rd, 2 days before the Lunar New Year, Wuhan locked down. By then, 5 million people had already fled the city. So that's kind of a list of events that we now see has a list of events leading up to the major outbreak. So throughout 2020, right, Chinese state media have tried various times to attribute the virus or the pandemic to a foreign origin. Italy, Spain, India, and the United States have all been blamed for being the source or possibly the source of the virus, as well as imported food. And there are a lot of people, including scientists and medical professionals, who actually somehow buy into that. But 3 years later, now with the massive number of cases, surging in China, and with a huge number of Chinese suffering from COVID, and a lot of people have died, things have changed. A major Chinese media portal, 今日头条, hold on, let me share this. I have it. It's translated as daily headlines. It had a headline called, "It is time to rigorously investigate if the COVID virus is made in the lab." The post mentioned no other than the bat lady, right? The infamous bat woman, Shi Jinping, the virologist from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The post mentioned a few academic papers she wrote related to the virus, and suggesting that she has the knowledge on that the virus came from the lab. It also mentioned a book authored by Professor Xu Dezong from the 4th Military Medical School, and the book is titled "The Unnatural Origin of SARS." The book was published in 2015, and the author said that SARS-CoV viruses are likely generated in an unnatural manner in the future. Okay, he's predicting, in 2015, he's predicting that SARS-CoV viruses are likely generated in an unnatural manner in the future. Such a bold statement on Chinese media now is drastically different from what we had seen before. And there are also videos. There are also videos that I've seen on Chinese social media that openly accuse the bat lady of being responsible for the virus. And Chinese are surprised that these videos are not censored by the regime. So why is there such a change? So I think maybe in a little while, maybe we'll have Chinese digging up dirt on Wuhan Institute of Virology. But why would the regime allow that, right? I think Xi Jinping is under a lot of pressure from within the CCP, right? I mean, think about all the cases, right? All the CCP leaders, getting COVID and then the death. So he may bring out the evidence against Shi Jinping and her team for the virus. I'm not saying that he will, but I'm saying there's a chance that he may do that. He needs someone to blame. He needs a martyr for him. He isn't doing this to be transparent. It's not about transparency. He does it to save the regime and protect himself or themselves. Otherwise, I think it's hard to believe that the Chinese censors would allow such a discussion, such videos, audacious videos being allowed on the internet. So let's just talk about how much pressure Xi Jinping has right now, right? So here's the picture that got people talking. This is what I mean by he might have dethroned himself. So before this year, so here's the picture compare Xi Jinping meeting the chief executive of the Hong Kong Autonomous Region, right? So you have the new guy in 2022, which he just met like last week. Notice the chair he sat in. Before, I think from 2016 to 2021, he sat in a dragon chair. Now this year, he sat on an ordinary looking leather chair. I have a better picture. I'll show it to you. So here, the top picture is the dragon chair. This is not an ordinary dragon chair. It's how dragon is a symbol for the emperor. So dragon chair is the synonym for the throne, right? Only emperors are allowed to sit on like a real dragon chair, right? The way the dragon is carved, it's on the chair. So yeah, he's being careful. He's playing low key now. He does not want to appear sitting on the throne or on that dragon chair. So he sat on an ordinary leather chair. So people say, "Wow, he must be under a lot of pressure." Okay, so that's the mystery behind how Xi Jinping dethroned himself. Now, let's just compare the Wuhan 2020 to Beijing 2022. There are some similarities and there are also some differences. I'm going to compare them in three categories. The first one is the authorities continue to cover up the outbreak, and there's continue to be the problem of lack of transparency. It was true 3 years ago, and it's still true now. So at the end of 2019, the virus was spreading in hospitals in Wuhan. The authorities tried to cover up. They interrogated whistleblowers like Dr. Li Wenliang. It was only when cases exploded or had exploded, causing infections of many medical professionals and having overwhelmed the healthcare systems, did the authorities admit the outbreak, right? And the same situation happened in 2022. I covered that already in my last week's live stream. We've talked about how a high-ranking official from the Beijing law and political and legal system who came forward and talked about how the outbreak started even during the party congress. Yeah, so I already covered that. I'm not going to go into that. But what I want to say is right now, China's National Health Commission, right, reported yesterday, December 24th, there was 4,103 new cases of COVID in China with no death nationwide, against all the viral videos showing, dead bodies in hospital emergency rooms, showing people, telling horror stories of their deceased family members. Despite all of that evidence, China's National Health Commission reported 4,103 cases with no death yesterday. And of that, Shandong province had only 31 new cases. Well, we know it's a joke, and now CCP's own official, has decided to defy that. And that's a change from 3 years ago. So the director of Qingdao Health Commission reported saying on record that 500,000 cases in the capital city of Shandong province, or the capital city of Shandong, had 500,000 new cases on December 23rd, and it was growing at 10% rate, daily rate. And Chinese said, finally, we've seen one city that's reporting the pandemic truthfully. It must be so embarrassing to the National Health Commission that 2 days later, today, it announced that it would stop publishing the numbers altogether because it's just too ridiculous, right, for them to publish the numbers. So if we do the math, now Qingdao has a population of 9 million. And China has 14 cities that with population between 5 million to 10 million. And China has 7 cities with population over 10 million. So if you do the math, and in Beijing, more than 10 million people already have COVID, or at least 11 million, because the internal meeting, the meeting minutes from the National Health Commission last week estimated that Beijing had more than 50% people getting COVID already. So Beijing alone had 11 million on that day. Shanghai is getting there. People that I know living in Shanghai is telling me it's living condition there is getting difficult because people can't get food delivered. Food shortage is going to be a problem because a lot of the delivery people are sick with COVID. So you could order the food online, groceries, but you have no one to deliver them to your home, and prices are so high. So living condition in Shanghai is really deteriorating. So if you do all the math, if Qingdao has 500,000 and still growing at 10%, and if you add up all the other cities, 37 million daily cases is legitimate. And that's the number that we've heard last week from the National Health Commission. So that's so what we have not seen any improvement at all. Oh, and sorry, I forgot to talk about the lack of transparency. The World Health Organization has received no data from China on the new COVID outbreak since Beijing lifted its zero COVID policy. And there's limited information, according to the experts, say that very limited information coming out of China about the sequencing of the genetic virus. And medical scientists say that they don't have enough information about what's going on in China. And some experts question whether Beijing might be hiding information. Others say that maybe Chinese authorities might be struggling to tally their numbers. Well, I don't think that's the case because the CCP's top-down, highly centralized approach to things are capable of producing numbers if it wants to. The number may not be accurate, but it definitely has number, and it does track number. But the CCP won't share it because it will make it feel like losing control. And this fear of losing control is an inborn fear in communist dictators that no one can help with. No one can change the CCP. So the U.S. Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, has asked China to be transparent, just like all the other countries. I don't think the CCP would do that. I think the world needs to come up with a better solution to deal with it. Just by patiently waiting, by politely asking CCP to cooperate is wasting our time. It won't happen, right? So I think people need to come up with a strategy. We should put pressure on the CCP and maybe tie it to some conditions. I mean, you just have to really, you have to force them to release the data for the interest of everyone in the world. This has nothing to do with politics. This is to protect people's lives. Okay, so we have not seen any improvement over China's transparency. It's the same, right? But we've seen that within the CCP's system, some local officials start to defy the central government, and that's the change from 3 years ago. Okay, so the second thing I want to talk about is this disease that we're seeing in China is very similar to the Wuhan pneumonia that we saw 3 years ago. I call it Wuhan pneumonia. I don't know what you call that because that's what Chinese calls it. It has high fatality rate and also has similar symptoms. So unlike the mild cold-like symptoms that Omicron causes, Chinese are surprised to find out that the symptoms of the early Wuhan infections are back. And many patients suffer from breathing difficulties. And Chinese call it the white lung, 白肺, and they call that the white lung. And it's oops, sorry, here we go. I have a picture. So Chinese call that the white lung. What it is normal lungs show up black on CT or X-rays, like the one on the right. This is because lungs are filled with air, and air is easily penetrated by X-rays. If there's inflammation, fluid retention, or a lesion in the lung, then the X-ray can't penetrate, and then the lungs may look white. In severe COVID cases, the lungs are filled with mucus that block the small airways, and it prevents the passage of air into the lungs, and then that's how the patients have difficulty breathing. So Chinese physicians have reported a resurgence of this white lung symptoms, and also pulmonary fibrosis. So it's a typical symptom of the Wuhan outbreak 3 years ago, and Chinese physicians have posted a lot of images like this on Chinese social media. So that's, Chinese are saying, what are we getting? Are we getting COVID? Are we getting Omicron, or are we getting the Wuhan pneumonia? So that's a big shock to many Chinese. And also the high fatality rate is another thing that's very similar to Wuhan. The official casualties during the 2020 Wuhan outbreak was set at under 2,500, but the real casualties are estimated to be between 42,000 to 46,000 based on the number of urns or urns with ashes distributed from the end of March of 2020 to early April by the 7 funeral homes in Wuhan, because they had a limit. They were only giving out 500, like each funeral home was giving out 500 urns every day. And that whole process, took like almost 2 weeks to complete. So if you do the math, it's over 40,000. And they try to finish that before the Qingming festival. Qingming festival is the traditional mourning day for your ancestors. So that's how people come up with a number. And also similar to what's happening in Beijing now, shortly after the pandemics broke out in Wuhan, local funeral homes and crematoriums were overburdened. The authorities brought in dozens of mobile incinerators from other regions to expedite the cremation of the bodies. They also brought in other funeral service professionals to help. The same situation is happening in Beijing, but this time the government can't get help from other regions because every region has this problem, right? Is short on labor or staff for the funeral services. So Beijing is now building 60 new, I don't know whether you call that incinerators or crematoriums, before they have a deadline before January 8th to handle the large number of deaths. So again, this is very similar to Wuhan. But there's one difference, okay, between Beijing and Wuhan. 3 years ago in Wuhan, the government paid for all of the cremation cost, including the cost of the urns. In Beijing, people have to pay themselves, and the prices are going up. People pay a minimum of 30,000 yuan, which is over $44,500, to cut in the line to cremate the remains of their family members if they don't want to wait over a month. And Chinese are furious, and they say we cannot afford to live and we cannot afford to die. Now, another difference between the Wuhan fatality and then the Beijing fatality is that during the Wuhan outbreak, many ordinary people died. And different from Wuhan is that now many CCP officials and their families and the Chinese elites are now the casualties. During the first 3 weeks of December, due to incomplete statistics, nearly or at least 50 CCP officials and retired officials from the central government in Beijing have died. And 2 of the Politburo Standing Committee members this is rumor, right? We can't confirm that, but they give names. Wang Huning and Zhao Leji are rumored to have gotten COVID and are hospitalized. Foreign Ministry's famous wolf warrior spokesman Zhao Lijian are missing for 20 days, and his wife has been complaining about not getting ibuprofen online. So people suspect her husband got COVID. And former Global Times chief editor Hu Xijing also got COVID. CCTV's primetime news, 新闻联播, its anchor did not change for 5 days. Unlike the Western news program, you have like a main anchor who just anchor that program, right? You don't like you have Diane Sawyer. I mean, that was from 10 years ago. Brian Williams, right? But in China, they changed the anchor every night. So they have a rotation of anchors. But the Chinese anchors, they just read. They just read from the machine, right? They don't report the news. They just read the script. So normally they rotate the anchors, but they did not rotate the anchors for 5 days. And people say, well, what's happening? And then finally they put somebody back on, and that person spoke with a very coarse voice. So people say, hey, probably the CCTV anchors also, were hit with COVID. Now, remember on December 21st, the traffic outside the 301 hospital, which is the best hospital in China where all the top leadership, the top leaders go for medical services. It was blocked for an hour. So people were suspecting some big shot was sent to the hospital. The next day or so, rumor has it that Xi Jinping's mother, Qi Xin, had died. And so what got people, I mean, this is a rumor that we can't just pass around. We need to verify. So what got people talk about that is Wikipedia. If you look at Wikipedia on the left, the Chinese Wikipedia, the version, it has a death, her life, it says born, sorry, the red line. If you look at the one that I marked with the red line, it says from 1926 November 3rd to 2022 December 23rd. And then the one on the left says November 3rd to December 21st. So there are two Wikipedia posts that had this, right? But with different deceased date. And then after that, it got changed back. So now if you go to the Chinese Wikipedia to search for her name, it does not show, it shows that she's still alive. There's no deceased date. So that's one thing that make people suspicious. Of course, Wikipedia is edited by the public. So someone might have edited it, right? But that's something that happened. And then the other thing that's it's even more suspicious is the homepage of the 301 hospital suddenly turned black and white. When you have a head of state or a big dignitary who died, Chinese website would show black and white. So all of a sudden, this they say, hey, why does it turn black and white? Is it because Jiang Zemin's death? But then if you look at the timestamp at 11:43 on the left, it's black and white, and at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it's back on. The color came back. So and then for a few hours, it was like some people when they go to the 301hospital.com.cn, sometimes it come up black and white, and sometimes it come up color. So depending where you are. So that's what's happening. That's the second evidence that make people think that his mother died. And then here we have another post. This is a post by the daughter of a former government official who worked for Zhao Ziyang, the former CCP leader who was sympathetic to the pro-democracy students, who was removed from power during the June 4th student movement in 1989. So this is the daughter of someone who worked for Zhao Ziyang, and then her father was also reprimanded. So this lady posted this post, said, I came back from dinner. I suddenly found that the Jingxi Hotel lights came up in the hotel. At least a third of the rooms have lights. And she said that this hotel is only used twice in a year. Once is during the spring, the two conferences, the People's Congress and the Political Consultative Conference in spring. Only when the delegates, only when they have that conference, this hotel is used. Or when the party congress is held, they use the hotel. In ordinary times, it was all black. However, during the week when Jiang Zemin died, she said that this hotel was lit for a week. And she said, last night, the lights came back on again. And she said, it reminds me of the traffic jam of the traffic block outside the hospital. And then she said, I felt like something was going on. So here's a close-up look of the hotel. And this hotel, I'll give you the description on the right. Basically, it's a hotel owned by the military. It's called it is the hotel that the CCP uses for the major conferences. That's the only time it uses for that. It does not host outside guests, right? It's a 5-star hotel. And some high-ranking government officials have their suites there. Some of them live there. So it's kind of an internal conference hotel for the CCP's most important conferences. So these three things make people think that his mother died, but we don't know, and then there's no announcement. So that's another issue. Okay, so now let's talk about so comparison is comparison from Beijing 2022 to Wuhan 2020 is that similar symptoms, both have high fatality rates, but the difference seemed to be that rather than seeing a lot of ordinary people who died, now we see a lot of high-ranking officials and their families, people who are considered the elites, who have died. So that seems to be a different trend. All right, the third comparison is, I can't think of a title, but I want to call it amassing supplies and travel control, right? It has to do with that. So 3 years ago, when the Wuhan epidemic spread rapidly around the world, because CCP covered up the outbreak in the initial stage, and also CCP stopped domestic travels, but allowed people to travel overseas, right? That also caused the virus to spread internationally. And also, while the rest of the world hadn't figured out what to do, China was secretly hoarding medical supplies overseas. In 2020, it was masks, and in 2022, it's OTC drugs, right? So the same thing is happening. As a result, I heard that there's a shortage of certain common cold drugs, like ibuprofen and Tylenol in Germany, Taiwan, some parts of Canada and the US, and maybe Japan. Now, China makes a third of the world's ibuprofen, so it should have enough production capabilities to handle that. So the Chinese are even asking, so what happened to all the drugs that's been made? Where did it go? So I think people need to pay attention to that. And the other thing is, remember we talked about how China is setting up global overseas police stations around the world, and I made a video to say that these global police stations will be used as procurement centers to help the CCP procure supplies in time of war or emergency situations like this. So I think foreign governments need to look into that. They're not just police station for the sake of serving overseas Chinese to do like IDs or driver license renewal. They serve a purpose as a procurement center. Because I read the social media posts about overseas Chinese, the mass majority of them said, I'm not going to ship drugs to China anymore. I did that in 2020. I bought all these masks, send them back to China to help the Chinese, fellow Chinese in China. But I'm not doing that right now. After 3 years, I've seen enough. I'm sick of what I'm seeing, so I'm not doing that. So that seems to be the opinions of a lot of overseas Chinese. So I'm thinking, so who are buying them? Right? Who are hoarding these supplies overseas and ship them to China? So people need to look into that. So other than the supply, hoarding the supplies, Beijing also wants to encourage international travels. First, it wants foreigners to return to China. It's getting rid of centralized quarantine policy for foreign visitors starting January the 3rd, and it requires only 3-day home quarantine. I don't understand why it requires foreign visitors to quarantine themselves, because China has the most cases than anywhere else. But anyways, and secondly, this is more important, it's relaxing its passport control. During the pandemic, we've seen Chinese complaining about having their passports being confiscated at airports by the authorities. And for a while, the CCP stopped issuing passports. Now they've allowed Chinese to be able to apply passports again. Yeah, here we go. So we have a notice that a screenshot. It's saying starting December 7th, in Beijing, you can apply for passports. This includes your permit to travel to Taiwan, to Hong Kong, to Macau, stuff like that. And so there were online discussions among Chinese in the last couple of days who were saying, this is a picture taken from a center that handles passport application in Beijing. And people there were applying permit. They say that applying to getting the paperwork or the permits to go to Macau is really easy. And so there are online discussions. So here's the saying, it's like, it's so easy. Like you get it in a matter of seconds. And then the Chinese are saying, they're saying, hey, why do I feel like this is a prelude to exporting viruses? You say, are we starting a month earlier than 2020, than Wuhan 2020? And then someone said, yeah, it's same thing happened in Shenzhen. Like you get a permit to go to Macau in a matter of seconds. So I'm just telling you what the Chinese are saying online. They're saying all of a sudden it's just so easy to go to Macau now. And then Chinese are saying, hey, if I can go to Macau, I can go to Hong Kong. And it's like they're in the free world. They're trying to figure out how to move on, right, to go to other parts of the world to run, because everyone wants to leave China right now. So let me see. Do I have more? Oh, yeah. Oh, and then I saw this post today. This is the China spokeswoman Hua Chunying posted a video on Twitter saying hustle and bustle returns to Beijing. Oddly, they're just like quite a number of videos showing massive people gathering in the streets of like Wuhan, Beijing, and other parts of Changsha, like in other parts in major cities of China, just big crowds of Chinese, and they want to show. I think there's a panel. They want to show like the cities are normal now, right? They want to create an impression to the world that China is back to normal. They do not want you to think that, these terrible scenes of dead bodies, lying in the, in the emergency rooms. They don't want you to remember that, but they want you to see, hordes of people, walking the street, enjoying themselves. And all of a sudden, you see those videos coming out of nowhere. And I think it speaks volume because this is she's the spokesperson of the foreign ministry, and well, I think the CCP is onto some PR campaign. So having learned our lessons from 3 years ago, right? That we suddenly see the virus everywhere around the world, and all of a sudden we are short of medical supplies because China has been hoarding them. I think we should be mindful of the possibility that the CCP wants to export the virus and cause a worldwide shutdown, because it will help, only that it will help CCP save its face. So we cannot rule out. I'm not saying they're definitely doing that, but I think we should be mindful of that, and we don't want it to happen again, right? So with that, and India is the first country that has required Chinese visitors, together with some other Asian visitors from other Asian countries, to provide negative test result if they want to visit India. And I think that's the right direction to go. But India so far is the only country that has required that. So with that, I finished my presentation. Okay, all right. Let's see. Okay. Merry Christmas. Thank you. All right. From Sir Humphrey. Hi, Lei. Hoping for the best when ordinary Chinese migrate for their Lunar New Year. Thank you for your efforts in keeping us updated. Yeah, unfortunately, the Lunar New Year travel will be bad. It will be a time when many of the migrant workers will return to the rural area. And if they bring the virus back to rural China, it will be more devastating because in rural China, the medical establishment is minimal. Yeah. Merry Christmas. Thank you. From Ed. I can't say your name. Travel with love. Probability is science. 新年快乐. Thank you. All right. From 马丁. 加油. 谢谢. All right. Travel with love. Only two options. Virus, RNA made in lab or not. Yeah, I found the Chinese all of a sudden are saying it's made, are challenging the bad lady. I think that's amazing. All of a sudden you see Chinese. I think it's good. Let Chinese do their investigation. Maybe they will tell the rest of the world what really happened in that lab. Thank you, Christopher Hamlin. Thank you. Travel with love. Okay, let me see. Charles Womack, do you have insiders in China whose name you cannot review for obvious reasons? Do I have insiders in China whose names I do, but I don't rely on them. I don't rely on my insiders to give me any information. People inside China, if they want to tell me something, fine. But my job, I use publicly available information to do my work. That's my trademark. I don't try to use, insider sources. It's all publicly available information. If it's a rumor, I tell you it's a rumor. But I do have people from inside China who tell me things, but I verify that. They may not always be true. Merry Christmas from Jennifer Wan. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jen. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. I think it's this one is Chinese and German. I can't pronounce that. Sorry. I've not learned German yet. Um, well, thank you so much for all the kind words and donation. I know it's holiday. I wish I have something happy to share with you, but I really think it's important that we have this conversation because everything that I'm seeing it's so similar to Wuhan 2020. And I really don't think we should repeat what happened back then. And we should learn our lessons to protect ourselves and our loved ones better. So, with that said, I wish everyone a great holiday season. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Is it still weekend? It is still weekend. I lost track. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Bye bye. See you next time. Bye. I feel like we are spending Christmas together. Such a kind voice. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. We are spending Christmas together. It's the best part of my Christmas. Alrighty, bye-bye.